So let's talk a little bit first about Patanjali. Those of you who have been following along with me online, you may or may not know that when I started practicing yoga, I'm 41 now, and I practiced yoga for the first time as a teenager. So it's been 2.5 decades of practice. And the interesting part of my journey for a Western practitioner is that I didn't really do any yoga postures until about 10 years into that journey, which essentially means that I wasn't doing what we think about in like present day yoga practice, like, down dog and Surya Namaskar and all of that. I was more coming at yoga from the space of meditation, an interest in Buddhist practice, and academics. So I went to university and studied religion. And the professor who was the dean of the religious studies program back then, he was a yogi. He was going through a divorce. He was having like a really tough time. I was struggling with addiction in my life when we met, so we were like a good team. And he really helped me to specialize when I was studying academically, to specialize and focus on yoga philosophy. And then at some point, he said to me, "Why are you going to university?" That's a good question, right? We should know our why. Why are you here? Like, why are you spending all this money to be here? And I told him, like, I want to be a professor. That's kind of what I want to do. And I come from, my father's an intellectual person, and so I followed that sort of old model of, oh, you want to learn to do something, then you go to school, you pay your money, you get the piece of paper that says that you're a whatever it is, dentist, doctor, accountant, in this case, person who knows about yoga. It's kind of a strange way to go about it, but that's how it happened. And he said, like, it's very clear that you are a yogi, and I would recommend that you just explore this as a practice, and don't waste your money doing that in this setting. And then when you're old like me, these were his words, not mine, you could go back to university and get your PhD and become a professor. But for now, just go out there and live it. That was the advice. And then he also said, don't tell the university that I'm giving you this advice, because they want money, and we all want to get paid for what we love and what we're good at, and I recognize that, but I also recognize that there was probably a more effective way to learn. So anyhow, that's a little background about me and why I love yoga philosophy. And then later, when I started doing the practice, physical practices, it took me quite a while to figure out like what I had learned in the classroom and what I had learned on pilgrimage to India, etc., like how that tied into what was happening in the yoga studio space. Like there seemed like a bit of a disconnect. Like I didn't see how this practice of hatha yoga, which literally means, if you translate the word hatha, means forceful and intense. How do we get from like this ascetic practice that is forceful and intense and said to be the slowest path to union or oneness with God? How do we get from that to like Lululemon and like booty yoga and like cranking up the tunes and having a good time, or you know what I mean? Like there was a disconnect for me. And then as I started to meet some of my teachers who have been practicing 30, 40, 50 years, longtime practitioners, they definitely helped me to see how they fit together, because they do go together. So that's a little background about me. And I love trying to do the same thing that my teachers did for me, and that is make sense of how the philosophy and the devotional elements of the practice can support the physical elements of the practice, and how they're actually not that different, and vice versa, how they go together. I'm really interested in an integrated and holistic practice. And one of the most effective ways to make that clear, I found, is to have a personal relationship with Ashtanga yoga. And when I say Ashtanga yoga, I'm not just talking about the primary series and second series and Ujjayi breathing and all of that. I'm talking about the ancient notion from Patanjali of the 8 limbs. Ashtau means 8, and Anga means limbs. So that's where we'll start. And Patanjali's maybe 2,000 years ago. So these are old ideas, and I do my best to present them in a way that is makes sense for the present day practitioner. So I made some little slides here for the presentation, and I'm just gonna. I used to do this a lot during the pandemic, but I haven't done it in a while. So bear with me as I kind of get my self organized. Let's see here. There we go. And then I can be like up here in the corner, I think. Aha, that's pretty cool, right? So let's start with the first limb. So we're going to go through the first and second limb. I've been taught by teachers who spend a lot of time with T. Krishnamacharya, as well as with my teacher Sri Dharma Mitra, who's going to be 84 in May, and other teachers in the Ashtanga lineage. Most of the teachers I've spent time with have sort of shared this with me as being cumulative, meaning that it goes in order, like without a relationship to, especially to the yamas, uh, probably no yoga is happening. Exercise is happening, which is great. It's not like one is bad and one is good, but the depth of the practice isn't happening without some awareness or connection to yamas. And I like to use the word with yamas, either values or virtues, to describe it. So, without values, without clearly defined values in our lives, we're going to be infiltrated by other values based on karmic relationships or our conditions. So there's going to be values based on like where you were born and who your parents are and what are your parents' belief systems and like what gender are you and what country do you live in and what are the practice. I mean, these are all karmas, right? The conditions of life. And those are going to have some influence, right? That's the nature of karma. They're going to have some influence on how we interact with the world around us. But if we don't have a clear relationship with values, then we are going to have external values imposed on us. And those values may or may not be in support of dharma. So we talked about karma being the conditions. There's conditions happening all around you. Like I explained, the things that you're experiencing, what you're born into, where you live, who you are in relationship with, how you interact with the world. These are all karmas and influence the way you think, which are also karmas. And then dharam or dharma is like the truth of who you really are. Okay. And so as we go in the practice, we want to have clearly defined values, or also like the English word virtues, to support a dharmic way of living, meaning that we're living not so much based on that external influence. It's not actually external, that's a relative term, but like things that are happening around us that may not be in support of us living out who we were born to be. Right? Is that making sense? So dharma, we want to orient ourselves to our virtues and our values in a way that is in support of dharma. And when we do that, then it's not like life gets easy or something like that, but it has purpose. You with me? All right. I can't see any of you, so I'll just assume that you're all saying, yes, I'm with you. Okay, I see a yes below, so that's good. And I'm fine if I can't see you, but I do like a little bit of feedback as we go. Makes me feel like I'm not talking so much into the void. All right, so Ashtau is 8, Anga is limbs. So the 8 limbs, just like in Buddhism or like the 10 commandments in Abrahamic religions, it's a guide system for how yoga works. There's 8 of them. They work together. Often they're experienced cumulatively. You may become aware of asana before most people do in the West, before you have any awareness of these values and virtues, and also niyama, the routines and rituals. But they're really like the depth of the experience comes when we start to orient ourselves in a way that is values or virtues in support of dharma, and then of course routines and rituals which are in support of those values. And then when we are practicing in that way, the depth of the asanas, the depth of the pranayamas, the depth of the pratyahara, or an honest relationship with our senses, the depth of the samyama, which is the dharana, dhyana, and samadhi functioning together, concentration, the experience of meditation, and the experience of sameness, it becomes fuller. But the yamas, the virtues or the values, are really the foundation. And then with a clear relationship to those, the niyamas will be even more effective, and the practice as a whole will be more effective. Does that make sense? So, before the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, which is not really that old, maybe like 600 years old or something like that, before that, it was believed generally that, you wouldn't be able to really have an understanding of how any of the techniques worked without a foundation of value or virtue and routine and ritual in support of that. But when the Pradipika gets written, you get these ideas of like, if the body is not in good physical condition, what good is yoga philosophy? Which is kind of the way that Iyengar talks about this, right? Because he was sick when he started. And so there's some truth to that. I would just encourage you to find your own way. But it is interesting to think, one school of thought is saying the techniques aren't even going to work if you don't have some understanding of the values of yoga or the philosophy of yoga. And then another one saying the philosophy of yoga is useless if the body's not in good physical condition. And I would say neither one is the correct answer. It really is about your conditions, your karmas, and also your dharma. Like when you come to this practice and why you come to this practice will just unfold. So you don't have to worry too much about whether it's right or wrong or good or bad or any of those things. Just do the practice and it will take care of itself. How's that? To make it complicated and then make it simple. Just do the practice and all this stuff will come clear. That's been my experience. And it's fun to, do something for the intellect, give the dog a bone, so to say, but don't get too hung up on the concepts. Just create a relationship with the concepts through a little bit of study, but most of all, practice, and everything else will be taken care of. Okay? I'm going to put this chat over to the side so I can see. If you want to put anything in the chat as we go, please feel free to do that, and I'll read it as I go. All right. So let's start with the heart of yoga, which is if you think about it like this, imagine that there's a wheel, like a wagon wheel or a carriage, like a horse-drawn carriage wheel or a bicycle wheel, where there's a center, and the center, without the center, the wheel doesn't exist. And then there are these other spokes, like 4 spokes that come off the center, and then a wheel around the side that causes it to function. You with me? So the center or the hub or the middle part of the wheel is essential for the other 4 spokes to exist, okay, for the wheel to turn. Or like a cornerstone, like Bob Marley, right? the stone that the builder refused will be the head cornerstone. Without the cornerstone, I mean, that's from the Bible, but he popularized that expression. Without the cornerstone or the foundation, the building will fall, right? It's like, or this other story from the Bible, you build your house on the sand and the house won't stand. You build the house upon the rock and it will stay. Okay, so in yoga, the first yama is the cornerstone. It's the heart, it's the center of the wheel. Without it, there is no yoga happening. Okay, and we'll get there. When I say yoga, I'm talking about oneness with God, oneness with self, oneness with all beings, right? Recognizing that all of life is interdependent. There is no separation. That's yoga. Okay, so the reason why the first yama is the heart of the practice is that it is compassion. Or when we say a, like in English, like asymptomatic. When we say asymptomatic, we heard a lot of that during this like pandemic time on the planet. When you say asymptomatic, you're saying what? There, you don't have symptoms. It's non-symptomatic. So same in Sanskrit, when we put an a in front, we're saying it doesn't have that. Okay, and himsa means to harm. So when we say ahimsa, it means to not harm. But when you translate that to English, it doesn't have the same sort of depth that like a virtue does. Like if you say, I'm going to go out into the world and not harm, that's great. I mean, do your best to do that. You probably are going to cause some harm because you're a part of nature, but that's a great, goal. And yet, the language is with the negative is not as poignant or as effective. And so, compassion, meaning like I'm going to do everything that I can to recognize that the other being is not separate or other. It is me. This other person has the same, like a metta practice in Buddhism. May all beings be happy. May all beings be free from suffering. Or the end of the Ashtanga yoga practice, we say, Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. May all beings be happy and free, and may I contribute to that. May I see myself in all beings. May I recognize that I am the cow, that I am the bird, that I am the soil, that I am the water, that I am the person hurt and angry and yelling at me, that I am my child, that I like it's all one beingness. And so without compassion, we buy into this concept of Maya, Maya meaning the illusion that some kind of separation exists, that there is an individual self that is separate from the whole, which is a small, in Buddhist thought they would say that's small mind, right? Small mind thinking. And with yoga, we're interested in big mind thinking. We work with the small mind to have that experience. We work with what appears to be our individual breath, what appears to be our individual stiffness in the muscles, what appears to be our individual problems with our relationships and dealing with sickness and death and all the things that happen in life. But we don't get caught up in the small mind so much that we think that's all there is, right? The liberation or the yoga comes when we're able to widen the lens of experience, and without compassion, that can't happen. It's like what the Buddha said when he said, before enlightenment, you stand by the river. After enlightenment, you are the river. You with me? So without ahimsa, without compassion, yoga is not happening because you're caught up in the small mind or this individualistic way of thinking. And a nice parallel to Jesus. You all know that is like my primary devata and my primary teacher. The way that he talked about this in multiple ways, but one of the great ways is that he talks about how you need to have childlike faith. Okay, childlike faith means like if you've ever been around a small child, If I took my daughter into the downtown Lower East Side in Vancouver, which is an intense place to take a child, which I've done when she was younger, she didn't feel afraid seeing people with addiction and seeing people who are like hunched over and seeing a lot of intense images. But she did want to know if the people were okay. She didn't have a feeling of like, oh, why don't they get a job, or are they going to rob us or hurt us, or the things that often grown-ups have. She wanted to know if they were going to be okay. That's childlike faith, right? That's compassion. That's an open heart, the heart of a child without judgment. Same thing. And it's difficult for for us sometimes to be like that, especially when we're in the small mind, right? So we practice yoga to widen the lens and to open up our heart to experience more of who we really are. And that is the heart of the practice. Okay. We know that we're going to cause some harm. We know that we're not able to do life without causing any harm because we're part of nature, but we do our best. That's the practice. Yes? Okay. Let's go. Let me know in the chat if you're following along or if you have any questions. And we can go on to number 2. This one I like the English translation of, so I haven't doctored it up too much. Satya, which means truth. I have a stay true tattooed on my knuckles as a reminder. Truthfulness. And I would even say beyond just truth, I would say a couple of things. So think about, remember how I talked about the wheel and then there's the spokes, how we need to, or it's almost like a lens or something. Yeah, nice. Integrity. Um, think about it like this, like it is possible to tell the truth in a way that's disconnected from compassion, right? Like some people use the truth or facts to control and manipulate or to be above others, like for hierarchy. So remember that at the center is compassion. So it's like telling the truth with kindness, asking yourself, is this necessary? Is this kind? It's not a sort of like a malevolent practice of truthfulness. It's a benevolent. That's with the compassion, right? How do I be honest in a way that brings the highest good, as opposed to the small-minded way of like, how do I use truth to get ahead of others? You see the difference, right? So Satya, I like, especially people I work with in recovery, is the reminding folks that it's like, this is really another great word is trustworthiness, right? Like addiction, really, like addiction isn't about drugs and alcohol. Addiction is about some kind of behavior that you keep engaging with that's causing harm to you, but is giving some kind of temporary relief at first and then causing more harm than good. And you continue to participate in that. And the reason why somebody who is in active addiction keeps repeating that kind of behavior often, not always, but often, is because they have developed a relationship with themselves where they can't be trusted and with others, right? This is often what people do, like with alcohol. It'll be like, okay, I'm tired of being hungover. I'm tired of hurting other people. I'm tired of hurting myself. I'm tired of feeling this way, whatever it is. And then you say, okay, I'm not going to drink for 30 days. And then you make it maybe like 5, and then you start drinking again. And you think, oh, well, what's the big deal? I did 5 days. Well, if we turn the tables on that and think about it like this, imagine that I said that I'm going to hang out with Kim And so Kim, I'm visiting her, and I say, meet me tomorrow after practice at 9. We can have a coffee and have a chat. She's like, great. Oh, I'm so glad. You're in town. We get to hang out. And then let's say I do show up and we have a great time and we hang out. And I say, that was great. You know what? Let's hang out again before I leave and go back to Vancouver. And so I say, let's meet Friday. Okay, cool. So then she shows up, same time, same place, and I don't show up. And, it's like, oh, well, something must have happened. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. Let's say I contact her and say, yeah, something came up, but I definitely want to see you before I go. So let's meet Saturday. And she's like, okay, great, cool. See you Saturday. And she shows up and I don't show up again. Okay. And now she's like, what's up with that? And I don't contact her. I just don't turn up. Okay. And then let's say like I leave and then I'm like, oh, sorry, I didn't turn up, but let's have a phone call and I want to let you know where I'm at. I'll call you tomorrow. And then I don't turn up again. Like at this point, she's starting to get a little bit frustrated with me, right? And that's only like 4 occasions that I'm talking about. Somebody in active addiction is doing that like thousands of times to themselves and to others. And then you think, oh my gosh, like how does that make you feel even just describing those 4 times? Like you may be worried about me, you're annoyed with me, you're angry with me, whatever it is. And then you think how much we do that to ourselves. And in order for recovery to happen, we have to reestablish trust with ourselves and others. And that happens one little bit at a time. And really, why like something like Ashtanga yoga or any kind of like committed sadhana, like I seen you, Cambria, doing your 100 days in the cold water. That's so inspiring. You must be coming to the close of that anyways. But where the medicine is, like, yeah, it helps to do the practice. Yeah, you'll get stronger. Yeah, you'll get more flexible, blah, blah, blah. But where like the real like juice is, the rasa, it's when you say you're going to do something and you do it. I'm going to get up at 3 tomorrow for practice. I'm going to do that 6 days a week. I'm going to do that. I'm only going to take 1 day off and on the new moon and the full moon. I'm going to, whatever. And you have all these things that you say you're going to do and you do them. What's happening is you're becoming a trustworthy person. You can trust yourself and other people can trust you. That's a very compassionate way to live. You with me? So I think about Satya not just being like, tell the truth or what's true, what are the facts? It's not that. It's like a truthful way of living. You with me? Trustworthiness. Right? It's like it's not just like facts. It's about like keeping it real, as they say. You're like or another good example is my daughter. She doesn't have a doubt in her mind that I'm going, that she's going to have like food in her lunch or that I'm going to be there to pick her up after school. Why? Because I've always done it. I've never missed a day. I never once didn't turn up. I never once, sometimes I forget to put a fork in there or something. I'm not perfect. But, over and over and over for years. Well, that means that we have a good relationship that she doesn't even have to think about, will my dad be there for me or not? And that's just in one area of life. And the reason she doesn't even have to think about it is because as a practice, I've made a point of showing up. That's how it works. That's satya, staying true. And when you make a mistake, you say you apologize or whatever, make it right, do better, and which you will because you're going to cause harm, but you're doing your best. Cool? So there's satya. Now let's go to asteya. So like I said, when you put the A in front, it means non. And steya means to steal. And for me, like thinking about that as a virtue, like it doesn't really translate all that well from English, like to English. Think about it. I'm going to go out there, I'm going to practice this compassion, this truthful way of being, this trustworthiness, and I'm not going to steal. Well, that's good. Okay, let's take away the ahimsa and take away the satya and just say this. I'm going to go out in the world today and I'm going to do my best not to steal. Doesn't really feel like, it feels like a good start, but it doesn't really feel like a virtue. You know what I mean? Like, not stealing is a great policy, but I want to know, like, why. What's the why? And so this is what I do with it. I go like this. What would cause a person to steal? Like, what kind of mind frame, what kind of karmic conditioning is a person in that would cause them to feel like they need to take something without any kind of honest exchange, like exploitation, right? What would cause that? Yeah, lack, right? Totally. So if you're feeling lack, if you're feeling, and that could be physical, your needs aren't being met physically. That could be your needs aren't being met emotionally. That could be your needs are not being met spiritually, you know. And so what do we do about that? Well, first of all, if your needs are not being met physically, hopefully you have somebody who's has an embodied yoga practice and they'll feed you. Right? Like if you get a chance in your life, I highly recommend that in northern India, you can go to Amritsar and go to this place called Harimandir Sahib, which we call in English the Golden Temple. It's the largest community kitchen in the world. They feed sometimes 20,000 people a day. Just seeing it happen is unbelievable. You could go there and eat 3 meals a day. There's no like, nope, you've already used up your meal. Your time's over. You could eat there every day, all day, 3 meals a day for the rest of your life, and nobody would bat an eyelash. Nothing is disposable. There's no plastic forks or plastic plates or things going in the trash. Everything is washed by volunteers. All the food is made by volunteers. All the food is paid for by volunteers. There's no exchange of money that happens. It is a yoga practice. It is the practice of seva, and that's their practice. It's beautiful, inspiring, breathtaking. The sound of the like tin trays that they feed everybody while they're being washed sounds like lightning and thunder. Like it's like all day long, people hand washing these things. That's a yoga practice. So hopefully if your needs aren't getting met, you're able to find somebody who's in a devotional practice, who's committed to feeding people. Salvation Army, the Sikhs, if you go to the Ganesha temple or the Hare Krishnas, anybody that's doing some kind of devotional practice, there's often an element of feeding people. So that's something that you could do if you didn't have a physical need being met. And then if you had other needs that were not being met that would cause you to want to steal, it's about looking at the blessings that you already have in your life and amplifying those. I'm so thankful that I can breathe. I'm so thankful that I have clean water. Maybe you don't have clean water, maybe it's something else, but just cultivating this spirit of thanksgiving, that's true wealth. True wealth is to notice the blessings that you have in the simplicity of life. And so that's why I use the word gratitude instead of non-stealing. Yes, commit to not stealing. That's a great way to be, but also look at what would cause you to steal. What causes you, and stealing can be many things. It can be like not seeing the value of who you are and wishing you were somebody else. That's a form of taking. Oh, I wish my practice was like so and so's practice, but I can't do that because I'm no good. You're stealing from God in a sense because you're not acknowledging who you are. yeah, wasting somebody's time. Exactly. Like, you know, not being guarded around, I've had experiences. Here's an example where somebody starts to share a story with me about some like really intense trauma that they've experienced in their life without asking for permission first, just like blindsiding me with a really intense um, experience, which I'm generally available to hold space for that person, especially if they're a client. But if they're catching me on the fly and I got to pick up my kid from school and then I'm cold to them, not on purpose, but because I have responsibilities in my life and there wasn't any consent, it's a form of stealing because I'm not able to be there the way that I want to be there and they're not being received in the way that they want to be received. So we have an issue. You know what I mean? So we want to meet each other from that space. So thanks, Sky, for that. Appreciate that. And also she's also saying leading others into unrealistic expectation. Totally. That's connected to the truthfulness and the trustworthiness. You know, another great thing to keep in mind here is noticing, like being uh, the word isn't hard on yourself, but like noticing the vice in yourself and the virtue in others. That's very important, especially as a teacher or somebody that is holding space for people who are in healing. It's like I don't want to point out the flaws constantly of another person who's trying to heal. Or like Jesus talked about before, you point out the speck of dust in somebody else's eye, remove the log from your own eye. That's what we're talking about here. So I notice the vice in myself, how I'm judgmental, how I have negative self-talk, and I work on that in myself. And then I work on, as I'm processing in myself, I try and look for the virtue in others. You know what I'm saying? Rather than the other way around. Oh, aren't I so wonderful and great? And here's all of the problems with this person, and this person is like this. And that happens a lot in yoga territory. Like, that practice isn't as good, and I don't do that practice. And it's like, you don't need to fix anything. Just do your practice. Let it speak for itself, right? Let it speak for itself. Practice gratitude, notice the virtue in others, and then work on the vice in yourself. All right. I think that's enough soapboxing for that one there. Removing the log from your own eye. All right. This next one gets kind of a funny rap. Like anything spiritual, it gets religiousized. Is that a word? It is now. Religiousized. Where it's like, you hear people talk about brahmacharya being celibacy. And sure, yes, yoga, like many spiritual traditions, was religiousized, meaning that you can take vows as a monk or a nun, and you can commit your life to living in solitude and doing this practice. And if that's the case, then celibacy would be some kind of vow that you would take. But I don't necessarily know that it's a virtue. Probably depends, but I would look at more like, why are you practicing celibacy, than saying the celibacy itself is the virtue. Does that make sense? So like, why would you choose that or not choose that? I'm more interested in that. So if we look at the roots of the words in Sanskrit and we go, okay, Brahma and Charya, Brahma, Charya. Well, Brahma is creator, okay, creator. And acharya means to face. So if you hear to face creator and then your mind goes, oh, that means celibacy. Okay, great, cool, do that. But when I hear to face creator or to face God, my mind doesn't necessarily go there. My mind goes to like orienting yourself towards your purpose, or orienting yourself towards creator or towards the inner guide or towards dharma, and living your life in a way that is a priority. Okay. Using your energy wisely so that it is in like an act of devotion, an act of surrender, an act of receptivity towards your beloved, or even seeing your beloved in everybody. Like in the Hare Krishna tradition and in Bhagavad Gita, it's like the practice becomes seeing Krishna in everybody you meet, or seeing your lover or your child or your mother in everybody you meet. Whatever way you can connect to that like deep felt compassion and really be of service to somebody who appears to be outside of you, like living in that way. And for some people, like God, that's going to make a ton of sense. Like for me, it does. But for other people, if they're thinking when we talk about God, we're talking about some being outside of you that, like, hopefully one day you'll be good enough to get to them, that's going to be confusing for them because I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the intelligence that we can't understand through reason, that is in everything, that is beyond the beyond, and that I catch glimpses of when I see a beautiful sunset, that I catch glimpses of when I hear a beautiful piece of music, that I catch glimpses of when I apply my discipline and show up and do my practice, which is really hard for me to do at some points, that I catch glimpses of when my daughter was born, that I catch glimpses of when I'm with somebody who's dying, that I catch glimpses of when I'm with somebody who's dying, like sick and is afraid of dying, that I catch glimpses of. Like it's something that words fail to describe, but it's in there and it's guiding me and it's giving me a reason to live when I'm stuck in all of my doubt and my addiction and my, like, it's like filling my heart with compassion and love for something greater than my small mind. That's my attempt at trying to explain what God is. It's not out there, it's in everything, and sometimes I'm aware of it. Okay, sometimes I'm aware of it. But for some people, they're going to go, well, I don't think about that as God. That's Mother Nature. Well, it's the same thing. It's just language isn't going to do it justice. It's like find a way to relate to it that makes sense to you. Like in recovery, we say you need a higher power. Doesn't matter what the higher power is to anybody else than you. You're the one that needs to decide so that when you're really struggling, you feel like you're not alone. And you don't say the famous mantra before relapse, which is fuck it. And then you make some bad choices. Be very careful with that mantra when it turns up, right? So when we talk about brahmacharya, we're talking about orienting ourselves towards this thing that's greater than our intellect, or greater than our harmful patterns, or like this higher power concept, or experience, presence, the presence that is never an absence, where you're like really here for life, right? I was listening to a talk this week where they were talking about how there's a word in Hebrew, I forgot the word now, but they were talking about how there's an actual word in ancient Hebrew where we get the Bible from, where I wish I could think of it. Anyways, pick my brain later and I'll let you know. But the idea is that you could be like in relationship with a person. Like you say you see somebody every day when you go to the coffee shop. You see them every day and you say like, hi, how's it going? And you have your small talk and you get your coffee and you're connecting and talking to each other. And you say, how are you? Good, I'm good. And then that just kind of goes on like that. And then like one day you see them and you say, how's it going? And they say, not good. And you say, why? What happened? And then they say like, oh, my daughter died. And then all of a sudden your relationship changes. There's like a expanding in the way that you connect with each other. You may handle it well or poorly. Like, I mean, it really depends. But all of a sudden, what was this like surface-based connection widens. You understand what I'm saying? It's like you get beneath the surface of reality and there's a deeper connect that's happening. When we talk about brahmacharya, it's like orienting yourself towards that deeper connect to the best of your ability, you know? And sometimes like it's uncomfortable, or like I know Ram Dass talks about like being in the checkout line at the grocery store and like saying to the teller, like, you are the manifestation of the creator and the whole solar system is in you and you are my beloved and I'm so grateful that we can be in this space together. He said like it's not appropriate to talk to the teller like that because they'll lock you up, you know, and put a white coat on you. And but to have that as a desire to experience life in that way, the fullness of life in that way, that's brahmacharya. Does that make sense? Right? It's like this orienting yourself towards God or towards the fullness of life, as opposed to just like going through the motions, right? And that's where the celibacy thing comes up. It's like, for somebody that might be the why, like their you know, sexual desires may be a distraction for them to like not exploit other people or exploit animals, right? It's like, well, I just want my body to be strong and healthy, so like I just eat whatever and it doesn't matter who is on my plate. What matters is like how it's working for me and how it makes my muscles look. And that's such a surface based reality. That doesn't mean that that person is bad for making that choice. It's about the why. You know, if you spend time around a pig and you spend time around a dog, you realize that they're just as intelligent. They're both, you can teach them to shake a paw, roll over, they'll feel empathy for you if they're struggling, etc. Right? Thanks for coming, Sky. I'll get you caught up on the recording. So when we talk about brahmacharya, it's a big thing. It's like, how do you face God? Like, it's like, how do you do that? You know what I mean? That's a big thing. Like, what does it mean to face creator? And you're going to be influenced by your belief systems and by your conditions and how you were raised and how you see the world and what part of the world you were raised in. What is your connection to nature? And but we are all we all have the same sort of like plumbing spiritually, in that we have the capacity to connect to that, but it's going to be unique for everybody. And when we talk about brahmacharya, we're talking about making that a priority, that connection. Yeah? Okay. So let's review. Compassion, recognize the other being is you, there's no separation. Satya, truthfulness, but truthfulness with compassion. I like to also call it trustworthiness, like being a person of integrity, being a person that can be relied on by yourself and by other beings. You know, asteya, which means to not steal, but even more than that, like what causes a person to steal? Lack. And so what can we do about the lack? Focus on the blessings that we do have, or gratitude. Brahmacharya, orient yourself towards Dharma, orient yourself towards God, towards Creator, towards a deeper experience of reality, to experience the presence that is never an absence, that is everywhere, or to see other beings as your beloved, or as your mother, or as your child, or whatever cultivates this spirit of compassion and a deeper way of being in the world, rather than just it's all about me, what do I get? Or the other ego trip is like, I'm not good enough and I don't deserve to be here, and so I'm just going to play small and not acknowledge how incredible I am. That's another ego trip, right? And then the last one is a very important one, which is a parigraha. And a parigraha, we sometimes hear people say like it means to not hoard. I don't think that's a very effective way of using the language in English. It would be, like I said, when you put an A in front, it makes it non. Parigraha means to hold on to something, or to grip. Okay, so not gripping. So we're talking about like letting go, or like my name, Tiaga. The Tiaga is a form of renunciation that is not sannyasa or sannyasin, as a practitioner of sannyasa. That would be like a monk or a nun, somebody who has no possessions. Okay. Tiaga is the other form of renunciation that's taught in yoga and in Bhagavad Gita, which means kind of like minimalism, like you only keep what's necessary. Like you don't just accumulate stuff for the sake of accumulating things. Or in Buddhist thought, like this idea of emptiness, right? It's like letting go. Like if this is not in service of Dharma, if this is not connecting you to God and to your compassionate heart, leave it alone. Just leave it. Let it go. Like, why are you holding on to that? And we do this all the time. We do it with physical things that we don't need, and then our homes become cluttered, and then it's a hook in our mind that makes it difficult to practice. But even more than that, we hang on to stories. This person is like that, and so they'll always be like that. You haven't forgiven them, and so you're holding on to this story that's causing harm for you and for them. Old versions of ourselves. And a funny one is like people say, I'm not a morning person. You're like, well, actually, it doesn't work like that. Like when you hear the birds twittering outside of your window at 5 a.m, there isn't a bird that just like stayed up late watching Netflix and then slept in, didn't come for the tweeting, and then said, like, oh, I'm not a morning person. That's not how it works. You are naturally a morning person. That's how the circadian rhythm of life works. That's how all of nature functions. But because you have the intelligence of a human being and the capacity to choose, which is a blessing and a curse, you are choosing to not participate in the natural rhythm. Or sometimes you have to work, like you're not, you're just trying to make a living and you're doing your best. But I've had clients in the past who are like, I feel like shit all the time. I'm trying to lose weight. I'm doing yoga. I'm eating all of the right things, and it's just not working for me. What can I do? And it 9.5 times out of 10 comes down to you got to go to bed earlier, sleep longer, and get up earlier. And then it shifts. And really, all that's happening is the person is in the natural rhythm. Okay. So the letting go is letting go of the story, letting go of, oh, I'm just always like this and this person's always like that. Just leave it alone. You want to experience the presence of God or the presence that's never in absence. Just let go of your expectations. You have an opportunity to do that with your practice every day. How's this going to go? I'm hurt. I'm not hurt. I'm strong. Yesterday was good, so today's going to be good. No, you just show up with that emptiness or that beginner's mind in every moment, right? So there's more of an opportunity to have that experience of brahmacharya. Just let go. Or you heard the story about the Zen monk who, there's a professor who studies Zen, but he's not practicing in the same way. He just knows the intellectual side. And he heard about this famous Zen monk that everybody loves his wisdom teachings. So this professor is looking forward to go and meet with this Zen monk. And he's got all of his notes and he's got all of the questions that he's going to ask this wise Zen monk. And he comes to meet him and they sit down for tea. And the Zen monk starts to pour the tea for the professor. He hasn't said anything yet. Even when they met each other, they just sit silently. And he starts pouring the tea, and the professor's holding the cup to be polite, as you do in Japan. And the monk just keeps pouring, pouring, pouring. And then the hot tea starts spilling out over the top of the cup, spilling out all over onto the table and into the lap of the professor. And he gets angry and puts his cup and says, what the hell are you doing? Like you're pouring tea all over the place. And he said, this is your first lesson in Zen. You came to this meeting thinking already that you know everything, and you come with a full cup. It doesn't really work, does it? You've come with an empty cup, like you don't know anything, and then we can really meet and explore this. That's essentially the teaching. That's the idea of beginner's mind. Every day is a fresh start. All that stuff, I'm too old, I'm too young, I'm too fat, I'm too thin, I'm too this, I'm too that, I'm too blah, 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 blah. Leave it alone. It's a process, right? It's easy to say, but you have an opportunity with the practice every day to go, I said I'm going to do this. I'm keeping my word with my satya. I'm showing up and I'm doing the thing. It's probably not going to go the way that I expect. So I'm just going to move through it as best I can. That's the practice of a parigraha. This person has let me down over and over and over and over, and they probably will again, but I'm going to do my best to, hold space for this person to take an opportunity to make a change, to choose what's better. That's why things like capital punishment and, like you eventually you don't get an opportunity to make things right. It goes against the yogic principle because, like Guru Nanak in the Sikh faith, he said, like, even the murderer is the murderer of God, the child of God. Like they still have the capacity to love. Does that mean that they should just be allowed to do what they want? Of course not. But underneath the story and the karmas and the pain and the addiction and the suffering is still the infinite one. Nobody is separate from that. That's what yoga is. I have these words, I wear them around my wrist every day from Guru Nanak in the Sikh faith that say, Ad such jugad such habi such nanak hosi be such, which essentially means you are born infinite. You're infinite your whole life. You're infinite even now. Doesn't matter what you did or the stories, and you will always be that. And the practice of yoga is remembering that. I'm born is infinite love. I'm always that. Even when I forget, I'm that. Even when I've caused harm, I'm that. And I need to keep remembering that's the practice, who I am. You with me? So those are the 5 virtues: compassion, truthfulness or trustworthiness, gratitude and non-stealing in brackets, brahmacharya, facing creator, facing God, making that a priority in your life. If God doesn't work for you, pick another word, right? Living in a way that is the fullness of life, right? And then practicing not holding on to things, letting go. And then there are the routines and rituals that support that way of living, right? So the things that you do that support your virtues and values. The things that you do that support your virtues and values. And the first one is sausha. And a lot of people think that sausha means cleanliness. And in some ways, I would agree with that. Sometimes people use the word purity, which I'm not crazy about because of all the religious baggage around that word. And even as a person in recovery, I don't use the language, oh, I've been clean for X amount of years, as if there was something like wrong with me before that was unclean. That doesn't work for me. If it works for you, cool. But for me, like underneath those choices that I was making was a person who was genuinely trying to do good, but I was powerless and kept making the same mistakes. I wasn't unclean. I was sick maybe, but unclean, I don't know. Doesn't resonate with me. So I think about, instead of cleanliness, I think about it like this. You ever been on a trip before, and before you went on the trip, you clean your house like more than you've ever cleaned your house before? Like you cleaned everything amazing. You cleaned the corners, wiped the baseboards, put everything perfect, clean sheets on every bed. The house is immaculate. And then you go on your trip, and then when you come back, you come into your house, and there's no clinging of the mind that's like, oh God, when I get home, I'm going to have to do this and do that, and I should have, done a better job of cleaning and all of that, like weight, right? The clarity of that kind of cleanliness, for me, that's what I think about when I think of sausha. Or like when I do my sadhana, I don't prepare the space the morning of. I prepare it the night before. I put the mat out, make the altar look nice, put out my clothes, get my coffee all set up and ready to go. Everything is perfect so that when I wake up in the morning and I'm preparing for my practice and I'm tired and there's resistance and I'm sore and I'm blah, 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 there's a clarity of mind where there's isn't anything extra. You know what I mean? Or keep your desk clean, or make your bed when you wake up in the morning, or you get it, right? It's like when you simplify your life, there's less things to worry about, that are within your power to do something about them. We don't need extra. Life has enough challenge as it is. So the clarity that comes from simple living, that's what I think about with Sausha. It's like the feeling that you get from having a clean space, not the cleaning of the space itself. The feeling that you get when things are organized and in their place and there's no like hooks in your mind. Because already when we're doing a meditative practice, our minds are busy. Any person you tell about meditation or yoga, they say like, oh, I can't meditate because my mind's too busy, or I can't practice because I'm not flexible. Those are the two most common responses that you get from people, right? And so that means that it's a common problem. And if it's a common problem to have a busy mind and you want to practice yoga, which is what we're talking about today, then do everything in your power to keep the mind as clear as possible, because you know it's going to be busy. That's Sausha. Then the next one people call Santosha, and they use the English word contentment. I'm not crazy about that. One of my teachers, they said, like, when you think about contentment, it's like go with the flow kind of mentality. And one of my teachers said, go with the flow is a dead fish. And we don't want to be a dead fish, especially in a practice like Hatha Yoga, which is a forceful practice. It's intense. Somehow along the line, we've been like, well, Hatha Yoga is the gentle one that's like not as intense as Ashtanga or Vinyasa. It's like, I don't know where that came from, but that's not the word. The word Hatha means forceful or intense. Okay. So when you're doing your Ashtanga yoga practice and you're thinking, oh my God, how many more vinyasas? And you're like sweating everywhere and wondering like why you don't just like do yin yoga or something. Like that intensity that we're talking about, that's Hatha yoga. Just a reminder, I know things get popularized by present day language, but that's what the word means. It's to do tapas, to do intense practice is Hatha yoga. And if you don't want to do intense practice, the best thing to do is sing and feed people. Those are much more effective for connecting with this ever-present beingness. Okay? I recommend doing it all, but So Santosha, not crazy about contentment. I like words like resilience. So that means like things aren't always going to go your way. You're going to come up against adversity, and you're not going to be bogged down by your expectations not being met. You're going to show up and do your best, and if it doesn't go the way you planned, it's okay. It's okay. You're going to be fine. I watched my daughter first year of basketball this year, and they got beat one day so badly that the coaches like from the other team were like, well, maybe we should just like reset the score and they can start again. And my daughter's team was like, no, we don't want to do that. This is the score. Don't embarrass us by saying we're going to do less. We're just going to do our best. I was like, yes, that was a moment of Santosha. Right? It's not like, oh, well, we're getting beat and we suck, so we'll just like mope up and down. It's like, no, ignore the numbers. You came here because you wanted to play. Show up. Do it. So what? You're not winning. Like that kind of thing. That's Santosha. Or fortitude. Like train your mind to be steady even when you're like, the whole fucking place is on fire and I have some sense of inner calm. That's Santosha. so that I can move through the tasks necessary to put out the fire. It's not everything's on fire. Oh, well, cool. I guess we'll just build a new house. Da-dee-da. No. That's a dead fish. Santosha means things aren't going to go your way. There's going to be adversity. It's going to be hard. You're going to feel all the feels. And be there for it, all of it, the good, the bad. Learn to hold it both, right? The both sides of the polarity. This is all over yoga. Ida, Pingala, the left and the right, the sun and the moon, the central channel, being able to hold good and bad at the same time, which also is in the Christian faith. If you look at Jesus when he is crucified, he's between two thieves in the center. One thief is good, one thief is bad, and he's able to hold them both. This is in all kinds of martial arts, the balancing of heaven and earth. It's a universal truth, right? The practitioner is learning to hold the pairs of opposites at the same time, joy and pain together, right? Pleasure and pain together. The problem with addiction is that we go, I want the pleasure, not the pain. Ignore the pain, pretend it's not there. Don't do hard things, stay away from it. Just the good, I just want the good. And then it creates imbalance. The practice, the Santosha piece is I'm going to have to learn to hold both. Is my daughter going to have pain in her life? Yes. Do I want the best for her? 100%. Am I going to be able to make sure that she never feels any pain? No. And is that a good parenting technique? No. Right? You with me? All right. Then we'll land the plane here coming up in a few minutes. These last ones we know are important because in the second book, Patanjali reiterates them, right? When he says, this is how yoga works. Tapa Swadhyaya Ishvara Pranidhana Kriya Yoga, which means like you really want the practice to work, these things are important. And they're the final 3 niyamas. And number 3, tapas, which means heat. Like I said, hatha yoga, it's a heat building practice. It's intense. Tapas is that like cultivation of the heat. It's the friction that makes that heat. And the way you do that is by being disciplined. You show up even when you don't want to. You show up even when it's hard. You work through it. Not violently, not in a way that's causing harm. I'm going to do this no matter what, so who cares? No, within reason, you take care of the body. But you don't allow that part of you that says, I can't, I'm not good enough, all of those stories to get in the way. You just show up and you do it and you do your best. Make it happen. You know, that requires effort. When the alarm goes off, you don't hit the snooze. You just get up and practice. That's tapas. Some days are easier than others. Yeah? Then swadhyaya, which is study, which is what we're here doing. Right? We're studying the scriptures. We're learning. We're open to learning. And then we're a student first. We have a teacher. And then once those things are in place, then we could be a teacher. But if you're not a student first, if you're not constantly engaged in study, how can you teach? Right? Integrity. Swadhyaya means study. So do the practice, learn, ask questions, talk to somebody who knows a little more about some subject you're interested in. Study, learn, open your mind, and immerse yourself in the practices. And then the last one, of course, is Ishvara Pranidhana, which is divine guidance, right? To bow your head, to live a prayerful life, to listen to the guidance of the inner knower, the inner voice. Right? We all have this, you can call it intuition, you can call it God's will, you can call it whatever you want. Ishvara Pranidhana is listening for that. It's making yourself available for that. Right? It's bowing your small mind, moving your small mind out of the way so that the intelligence that is beyond the beyond can speak to you and through you. This happens through devotional practice. And those last 3 are very important, right? Discipline, study, this is a lifelong practice. It's a 30, 40, 50, 60-year program, not a 30-day program, Not a 100-day program, a life of practice. Some say even lifetimes of practice. Study, and then always remember that the whole purpose of this is a spiritual practice, to connect with God, to connect with your inner guide, to connect with your dharma, your purpose, and why you're here. All right. So there we have our chat on Yama and Niyama. Hopefully you were able to soak this in, doing whatever it is you're doing. I know it's an interesting time during the day, depending on where you are. Some of you are out east, so what does that mean? It's 2:30 or something like that. I'm gonna keep doing stuff like this. I'm away in Mexico for March, and then I'm gonna start doing, I think, Thursday evenings. But if somebody has if you have some idea of a time that would work well for you, I'm always open to suggestions. You can send me your suggestions via email or on social media. I'm going to do 2.5 weeks of an online Mysore program starting March 6th. So if you'd like some support in your practice, doesn't matter if you've done Ashtanga yoga, if you're brand new, doesn't really matter. What I'm going to do for that program is it's going to be Monday and Wednesday at 6 a.m. Pacific. You can show up at any time. That will be Mysore style. And then Fridays, I think I'm going to do a half lead online. So you'll have guidance for the Fridays. So if you're into that, let me know or go to tattvasyoga.com. I'd be stoked to have you in there. And then I'll be doing Mysore in person when I get back, Vancouver in April. If you want to go even deeper in your studies, it's a great option to do the Tattvas Yoga Studies program, which is one-to-one mentoring. And I should also mention before I go that today's the 27th. So the cost for that program is going to go up significantly on March 1st. So if you want to book 12 sessions with me at a good rate, it's a good time to do it. Go to tattvasyoga.com or get in touch with me. And thanks for coming, y'all. I'll see you soon. Peace.